Welcome to Murder Most Foul, a podcast devoted to exploring famous murder cases of our time. Some solved, some unsolved, but all fascinating and guaranteed to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. I'm your host, Jim Solanowski. Today's episode: Karen Reed murder trial, deja vu all over again. When last we saw our heroine, Karen Reed, she was free after her trial last year for the murder of her then boyfriend, John O'Keefe, when it ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury. But like all soap operas, we are not done yet. Her second trial has just begun, and it promises to be as bizarre as the first, or even more so. It is my pleasure to check in once again with Kevin Lenihan of Yellow Cottage Tales and a frequent guest on Court TV's gavel-to-gavel coverage of the trial for his expert analysis. Yep. So, again, for people, I can do a little here that Kevin has a podcast and YouTube channel and all that good stuff. And he does a lot of live stuff, and which is great. And he's also, and he'll tell us about that, he is tapped on to be a regular, it seems, for the Karen Reed trial on Court TV. They're one of their evening shows after they're done covering our gavel to gavel in the courtroom. I'm sure they'll do that again. So now we're going into trial too. So what is your feeling?
Well, one thing about this case is if you wake up every day expecting some big new development or revelation, it just seems to happen all the time. The most recent one was someone who had become an alternate juror on this case, selected as an alternate juror randomly through the draw. And so after sitting through the 10-week trial, she didn't get to deliberate with the people that she had been with all that time. She shows up the next day in court dressed in pink, which is, as you know, the color of the pink armies. As a juror, she had to come through hundreds of them every day. And she was crying. So she was very upset that she was taken off this jury. She has clearly been in close touch with Turtle Boy. So Turtle Boy, as have a couple of the other, at least one other juror and the dismissed juror. So this alt juror turns out to be a lawyer. Okay. And 3 weeks ago, she had Christina Rex from WBZ issue a lengthy statement that she had pre-prepared, and this is important, where she says essentially that Karen Reed has suffered injustice here to corruption. And while that was going on, unbeknownst to Christina Rex, this woman, whose name is Victoria George, had just signed up to work for the defense team as a consultant. And some states, like Connecticut, has a law against that. So, but really what she did was deceptive. She's joining the defense team, but delaying that announcement so they can put out this statement. It feels like something totally manufactured and orchestrated by Alan Jackson. And there's an article in Vanity Fair that comes out, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, when they made that announcement that she was joining the defense team. And hours after they made that announcement, Vanity Fair releases that article. And they said in the article that this interview took place a few weeks ago. So the Vanity Fair article is a total Karen Reed plant. Everything in there. There's no attempt to get any debunking evidence of the conspiracy, just as they had done an article with Karen during the fall. But so, it's so unethical that this woman joins the defense team, but delays announcing it because they obviously had told her, if you really want to help us, put out a statement how dissatisfied you were as a juror. So this is just something. There's a new crazy development like that continuously in this case. And I did an interview earlier today, Jim, and with another guy named Jim. And when I got on there, I thought it was going to be you. And I said, wait a minute, this is not my old friend Jim. This is a different Jim. So I told them how this case is so many strange things, and some, most of them have nothing. They're meaningless. But so, like Karen Reed, that when she arrives at the crime scene in a vehicle driven by Kerry Roberts and Jen McCabe is in the car, and they're getting back to look for John. She's sending a call to John when she spots him buried in the snow in the yard. So she jumps out of the car, throwing her phone down on the street, leaving the call sending. So when she goes running out to John, when that call eventually connects to John, it goes to his voicemail. And the next 5 minutes of everything that happens is captured. There's just like, have you ever heard of a case like that where something like that happens? So, I mean, this just seems to, it's a case that has new developments like that over and over, where the federal government is investigating the investigation before the trial. No one's ever heard of anything like that happening. Where the U.S. attorney himself questions the witnesses before the grand jury, where he uses a blow up of Turtle Boy's blog, while he was doing that, knowing that man was going to their houses with a bullhorn and with a large army of people to harass them and accuse them of being murderers. Here you have a very, very powerful U.S. attorney, very, very powerful position in the government. You have this guy using a blow up of TB Daily News. And then to add more strangeness to it, Turtle Boy is the kind of guy that last year during the trial, when this lengthy trial was held up for an hour and a half as there was an attempt to get him out of the court. That was the proudest. You and I would be ashamed of that. We wasted the jurors' time. That was the biggest day of his life, because this is a guy that loves any kind of attention, right? So he knows, because I've been reporting this for a long time, that the U.S. attorney used, it's almost like saying the attorney general did. It's, the attorney general is always the next position higher than the U.S. attorney. This should be the greatest bragging issue of his life, to be able to say, wow, the U.S. attorney questioned these witnesses in the case of my life that I've tethered my whole fortune to. They used my blog. I can tell you, if the U.S. attorney used something that I wrote, I'd be proud, right? I'd be mentioning it. He won't talk about it.
And again, for people who don't know, he is a champion of Karen Reed. And beyond that, he calls himself a journalist. He's not. But you mentioned his need for media attention. I have not read it. My wife is my spy. She picks up books at the library. She goes, "Do you know this case?" I go, "No, I don't know that one. Oh, it's a new book. It was on the new book case." So I do that. And also she subscribes to, and of course I read New Yorker and Atlantic. Have you read the Atlantic article on Turtle Boy?
I did not read the article. I heard it was
I haven't read it yet either. So we're in the same boat.
I heard it was kind of a glowing report, or at least he was very happy about it. So
I'm sure he was, because
it's disgusting.
It's media, and no one's going to really call him on it. Where does he stand right now? Because he, different from journalists who may, get in someone's way, try to stop someone's car, they don't end up being charged with witness intimidation and harassment. So I know he had a bunch of cases, then he was out on bail or continuance or whatever, but he had to kind of behave himself. And then he got charged again. I don't know why he didn't get thrown back in jail. So before we go on to Karen Reed, right. where does he stand right now?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on all the things going on, but yeah, he picked up a new charge recently. He was drinking at C.F. McCarthy's, which is right next to, which is where John and Karen were drinking that night too. And it's right next to D&E Pizza, owned by Chris Albert. And he's drinking with the Glare, another, like I call him the Tennessee grifter. He's the grifter. He's this guy from Tennessee that's, like so many people on this case, have absolutely no interest in what happened or what the truth is. They just grifting on the public thirst for conspiracy theory. So the two of them are inebriated and they get out, and Turtle Boy sees a camera because D&E Pizza's closed, sees a surveillance camera in there, and he starts mouthing off to it, saying your son's a murderer and this and that. So he picks up another witness intimidation charge. So he's an idiot, for one thing. And but there was a grand jury, a second grand jury that last year looked at whether there was a conspiracy between Karen and Turtle Boy to intimidate these witnesses. Now, at the time, they hadn't yet got the taint team had not finished with Turtle Boy's phones and Karen's phones, so they didn't. They failed to get an indictment, but they can. There's alleged other grand juries that have been going. I don't know if there was one currently going. I would say that a grand jury in this state's only 90 days, so they're probably going to wait until they really have all of that evidence from the devices. But interesting. So, and I got actually. They pretty much named me in court yesterday, the hearing, not by name, but they put me in the motion. So Turtle Boy's lawyer named me, former FBI agent Jen Coffenaffer, who's on my channel, and good friend Kate, she has her own channel, Breaking the Case with Jen Coffenaffer, and then Kate Peter, who's been very instrumental in investigating this case, and she comes on. The three of us cover this case during the trial, and so Turtle Boys has put this in there that we have been talking to someone in the DA's office and that we have inside information about what's in those phones, Turtle Boys phones. So they put this in there. I have no contacts in the district attorney's office, any district attorney's office. I have no contacts with anybody connected to the prosecution. Sorry, my phone was beeping. And I have no information about what's on those phones, and I haven't reported any information with this exception. What I have reported is that we may see in those phones Karen giving the addresses and other instructions to Turtle Boy when it comes to targeting the witnesses. But that's not based on speculation. It's based on the words of Turtle Boy. Because what we got in the fall was Turtle Boy's admin chat from a Facebook group that has his name on it, Turtle Boy Official Free Karen Reed site, something like that. But that he didn't launch and doesn't technically administer. Nick Rocco and his wife, who cover this case, and Nick is on Court TV a lot with me, they're Free Karen Reed, and they form the webpage, they form the Facebook group. So Turtle Boy was upset just before the last trial. After he got out of jail, Karen understandably was kind of distant, had kind of froze him out I should think Turtle Boy would understand why. She's about to go on trial, and here's a guy who's now been charged with assaulting his girlfriend. And I think those charges have been dropped, but at the time, you could see why Turtle Boy wouldn't attach to that. I mean, Karen wouldn't attach to that. But in addition, making things worse, as the trial was beginning, and they were in this small courtroom, and so the only way to get a seat in there is to be a guest of one of the families. Karen had Nick Rocco in as a guest, not Turtle Boy. And he was seething about that. And then Court TV started covering the case every night. And they had Nick Rocco and me, not Turtle Boy, seething. So what he said in his admin chat, he said, I'm going to go to the state police because I have evidence that will destroy Karen Reed, criminal evidence. He said, I have evidence that she is the one that selected and helped me select the targets to harass them. That she was involved in the rolling rally where over 100 people went to each of the witnesses' houses. That she, interestingly, there was a famous, so about a month after Turtle Boy started covering this, he showed up at a camera crew at the lacrosse game of the witness who they say is the mastermind here, Jen McCabe. She's at her kid's soccer game. Turtle Boy shows up and starts harassing her with a camera in the stands. She's there with her daughter and her husband. But because of the camera, no one really does anything. And these aren't they're not violent people. They're not, it's, for my day, someone would have tossed him out of the stands, but these people aren't like that. They're decent people. And so Turtle Boy has said that Karen knew that Turtle Boy was going to this lacrosse game, and she had a message for Jen. She said, did you think you could outsmart me? So Turtle Boy, and you could see it in the video, he says to her, and I always thought it was strange, like, why say that? 2 or 3 times, Turtle Boy shouts at Jen McCabe, did you think you could outsmart Karen Reed? And I was like, what a strange thing to say. But now we know that, or allegedly, if Turtle Boy's telling the truth, that Karen told him to say that. Well, this is somewhat now corroborated to some degree by the documentary that just came out on Discovery ID on HBO Max called Body in the Snow. I am in that documentary. Very tiny part. And so in that, Karen, very strangely, in talking about Jen McCabe, she looks at the camera and she says, one of us is going down. It's either me or you. She doesn't say it's either me or Jen McCabe. She says either me or you. So she's looking at Jen McCabe through that camera lens and personalizing this battle. That sounds very similar to someone that would say, did you think you could outsmart me? So to me, that kind of verifies what Turtle Boy said, that Karen was behind that message.
Now, what again, I'm trying to, in some of this, I try to follow the legalities. In other words, I'm not a lawyer, but I do watch Law and Order. So there was something in the news that the prosecution wants to get at text between Karen and her lawyers. So I don't know how you can do that. We'll talk about that in a minute, but still on Turtle Boy. Now, you said they're going to get his phone, so they've got his phones. Obviously, Karen Reed is under investigation and trial. What was the premise of or the legality of grabbing his phone?
Okay, so Turtle Boy's phones were initially taken under the investigation for witness intimidation. And what Hank Brennan, the special prosecutor in the Karen Reed case, did was the special prosecutor assigned to the Turtle Boy case, Judge Cosgrove, he was a former judge, had given Hank Brennan basically some kind of notification that there are texts on here that you would be interested in. And they still don't have all of them. I think they only have 2 of his phones. But so Hank Brennan made a motion to get the communications of Turtle Boy with Karen's lawyers. Remember, Turtle Boy, there's no attorney-client privilege between Turtle Boy and Karen's lawyers. And he revealed some of those communications show just how rotten Karen's lawyers are. They were communicating directly with Turtle Boy, giving him attaboys, feeding him information, encouraging him to be out there with a bullhorn, just while this witness intimidation was being launched. So the lawyers are, but that's not to say that it's criminal, right? Like it's not that they were doing anything legal, but they were doing things scummy. Now the judge did not in the end allow Turtle Boy to get communications allow the special prosecutor to get the communications that were between Turtle Boy and Karen's lawyers. But they were allowed to get the communications between Turtle Boy and Karen. It remains to be seen what is in that. She did do most of her communications over this encryption app called Signal. So the messages automatically delete. I would assume.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to stop here, of course. I'm recording this on Saturday, the 29th. And unless you've been living under a rock, we all know what the Signal app is. We'll leave that there. We're not going to be political. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Right. I'm surprised the government has to use it, but yeah.
I didn't say that. He said that.
Yeah.
But there are basically 2 theories of the crime. There can be more, but in this case, at least put before a jury and going to be put before a jury again, are 2, and the press. 2 theories of the crime. One involves Karen Reed directly, and you can decide whether it was intentional, but Karen Reed's car, truck, SUV, accidentally, on purpose, inadvertently causes, not necessarily hits him. We got debates about that. Causes her boyfriend and the deceased, John O'Keefe, to hit the ground, a frozen ground, a concussion, or been knocked out, and again, we'll talk about this a little bit, that he was technically alive the next day when they hit him. In what form, I don't know, but they did not declare him at the crime scene. But so he falls down from the blow, from it was December, or hypothermia. He dies. That's theory 1. Theory 2 is that Karen Reed drops him off at this after party where the 2 of them had been drinking quite a bit, and he goes in. This is again the defense, the alternate theory of the crime. She goes home, goes to sleep. The theory then that everyone comes back and finds him on the lawn at 6 a.m. is that this group, this party, which involves police officers, friends of police officers, girlfriends, wives of police officers. There's an ATF agent locally stationed in the area, and he's at the party at one time or another. And so it's a large party. So there's basement and first floor and all that. So anyway, so he goes into this party, some sort of fight, and everyone's drunk. So yeah, fights happen. So a fight happens. During the fight, John somehow mixes it up with a dog that the party people own, and he gets bit all up and down his arm. Then somehow his head is struck, it falls down, hits a table. So, they're not saying, defense isn't saying it was intentionally killed, but he is injured. So these are police officers. They don't check to see if he's still alive or whatever. He's not moving, whatever's happening. They pick him up. They carry him outside to their own lawn. These people own the lawn. So 2 or 3 of them, how many it takes to drag him out, dump him on the lawn at 1, 2 in the morning, and go back to the party, or everybody goes home. So that's the conspiracy of all and everyone says that were interviewed. He never came into the party. He didn't make it into a party. His phone, which we'll talk about in a minute, talk about apps, which I didn't know. I know tower pinging, but I didn't know you could literally track by feet where a phone goes. And according to this is all the tech that comes out at the trial, the forensics, that his phone never made it into the house. And it's found under him, the next morning. So the phone never makes it into the house. But so we've got the phone that says he never was in there, and the dog bites that say he's in there. So those are the 2 theories. And they obviously they're much more involved, but those are, paring it down. And I'm a big fan of Occam's razor, and which says usually the simplest answer is the truth. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. So you either got to buy this convoluted conspiracy, and then they continue to lie to the police in trial that everything that comes up, it's a lie. He was never here, and that's a lie. They're all working together to cover whoever knocked him down. Doesn't mean they all did that, but afterwards even, Mary, we killed John last night. It was an accident. So you got to tell everybody. So the conspiracy wasn't necessarily everybody saw it or took part of it, but then the act to protect, the blue line or whatever you want to call it, they're going to do that. So those are the 2 theories that, in fact, one of the theories is not technically, I guess, was it allowed? Somebody else did it. So let's take it from that in the first trial, because all of this it's been cleaned up a little bit with motions. This time around, you can't do this. This time around, you can't do that from the judge. But that alternate theory of the crime, they actually can't put evidence up, but they can avoid. Help me with the legality of the other theory.
Well, I'm going to help you, but first I have to go to law school and then come back. So let me check. No, I'm teasing, Jim.
I know.
I do the best to understand what I can from following the trial and from listening to some of the lawyers that I communicate with about the trial. So one of the first things that people have to understand is and I think you explained this, is that there is a fundamental either or at the heart of this case. Either Karen did this, or there's a conspiracy, and all of that evidence was planted, because the taillight pieces were found in a debris field around John's body, or just before John's body. And those pieces were reassembled later on by a criminologist, and they matched perfectly the missing piece on the Lexus, on Karen's Lexus. So unless all those pieces were planted and other things that had to be manufactured here, Karen did it. Now, there were still mysteries. Did she know what she did? When did she know it? Things like that. So those are other things to be sorted out. And it may be that she never knew, but the fundamental debate here is whether or not there's a conspiracy. So if Karen's Lexus did strike John O'Keefe, then there's no conspiracy, right? So the public is fascinated with these things that are put forward by the defense team as odd things. Now, many of these things that were presented to us as odd were easily explained later on, sometimes before the trial, some of them during the trial. And it boggles my mind that people in the public don't seem to have the common sense, street smart skepticism to say, all right, it's the job of a defense team to create doubt, and turning every mundane thing into something odd or unusual, everything that they can do with that tends to create a little bit of doubt. And you know that, and you say, okay, maybe there's an explanation. So let's wait for the explanation, or let's try to find the explanation. So one of the things in this case was, and this Alan Jackson tried to play this up in the documentary, and the defense tried to play it up in the trial, and Nick Rocco on Court TV with me tries to play it up. So John's clothing did not enter the state police computer system until 6 weeks after John's death. Ooh, where was that clothing? Was it in Trooper Proctor's car? Did he take it to the laundromat and wash it off so there was no dog DNA on it? Was he sprinkling taillight pieces on it? What nefarious things were the state police up to? This is suspicious. This is something wrong. So Alan Jackson, turns this up, and they turn it up in the hearings, and it's repeated over and over again by the likes of Turtle Boy and everybody else that has made a cottage industry of making this suspicious. Well, I ask people in the public, do you think there might be an explanation? Should you look for it? Or do you think, wow, maybe Trooper Proctor really did have the evidence in the back of his truck for 6 weeks? Well, it turns out the answer is completely mundane, and the defense team knows it. And once I explain it to you, you'll be like, yeah, that's really obvious. I didn't know it at the time either. So I started out from a point of ignorance on many of these things too. So you wait for the explanation, but you be open to it, and when it comes, you understand it. So a homicide investigation, any unattended death, which includes obviously homicides, in the state of Massachusetts, those investigations are headed by the state police unless it's in one of the three big cities, Boston, Worcester, Springfield, that have their own homicide departments. So these investigations are run by the state police, but it's not like we imagine, like this is like it's the FBI, this massive force of state police troopers that are working out of a barracks like the FBI work. It's not like that. What it is there are a certain amount of troopers that are assigned to the detectives unit at each county's prosecution office. So in this case, there were 4 state police detectives assigned to the Norfolk County DA's office. 2 of them were on this case. That's why it's hard to also, during a blizzard, if someone is conflicted out because they may know someone, it's not that easy to just call in someone else. They only have 4, So, and Trooper Proctor happened to be, it came on his watch. So now let's get back to the evidence. Where is the evidence stored? Is it stored in some state police barracks? No. It's stored, like you see, remember the old Law and Order episodes. The police do the investigation and the prosecutors do the prosecution. Well, naturally, the evidence is stored with those prosecutors or near those prosecutors. So inside the district attorney's office and inside every district attorney's office is what's called, interestingly enough, the evidence room. Capital E, capital R. And that evidence room in the barracks in Norfolk, and not in the barracks, I'm sorry, in the Norfolk County DA's office, there are 2 troopers that are assigned as evidence officers. And they're the only ones that can go into the evidence room. So Trooper Proctor and Trooper Buchanan that were investigating this, they didn't even have access to the evidence room. So John's clothing was set out to dry for a couple of days because it was wet, so it was set just outside the evidence room. And then it was moved by the evidence troopers. It was moved into the evidence room where it stays for 6 weeks. But then 6 weeks later, that clothing, as other types of evidence, such as glass pieces and stuff, certain types of evidence, have to go out to a lab for specialized testing. There's no labs inside a district attorney's office. Where the labs, they're in this. That's where they're in a state police facility. So it's when those clothing goes out to the state police lab 6 weeks later, that's when it first is entered into the state police evidence system. Nothing nefarious, nothing odd. Once you understand how it works, everything perfectly explained. And just one more quick example on that, Jim. So Alan Jackson standing in court, one of the early hearings on this when the mobs were first forming, and he's pretending, he's looking at the camera and trying to pretend he's not. He's really performing. He's supposed to be talking to the judge, but she even got annoyed a couple of times. He's clearly performing for the camera, right? Yeah. And he's saying, I want to know about the gap in the library video. And it caught me too. It fooled me too back then. I'm thinking like Nixon Watergate, like where's the gap in the minutes there? Somebody deleted that, right? Who deleted that video? And he says there's no video from on the library video from 12:37 to 12:39 or whatever. That was his estimate of what time Karen went by. And then somebody later on, I don't even know if it might have not even been on this case, but they said, those cameras are motion triggered. And there's 3 different ways that Karen could have went home from the crime scene to John's house. There's no way of knowing she went by the library on the way home. And the fact that there's no video of her going home logically most likely means she just didn't go by the library and it never triggered the motion triggered cameras. That we on the outside don't know until we see the explanation. But people should at least begin with this common sense understanding that because it's a job of a defense team to create doubt, they're going to stitch together a narrative.
Anything that
works.
And
it's going to try to make things look odd and stuff like that. And there will be some legitimately unexplained things in every single 100% of every single criminal case that's ever existed since Cain and Abel. There's going to be some aspect that's unexplained. Who was that mysterious person that Cain was talking to beforehand or something like that? There's always something, and your job in the public. Now, some things, odd things can be meaningful. Maybe they become more meaningful if to the degree that the prosecution's evidence is not very strong. But if the prosecution's evidence is strong to the degree that it is strong, then those odd things become not meaningful. They just become odd things that are a part of life.
Well, and the judge, again, this is probably from a Law and Order, but maybe from this case as well, one of the things that the judge does charge the jury with is if you don't believe something someone said, you don't have to disregard the rest of their testimony. Mm-hmm. Or, if you hear one thing and then you hear it doesn't, each element that you are debating has to be treated individually. It doesn't. Right. It doesn't like a Jenga. It doesn't all fall down because we can't explain why there was a 2-minute gap in the film and the video. You're explained. You don't have to believe that it was just motion detector, but that no, she's innocent because they tampered with it. No. Now, what I want to, because again, the evidence is out there, and I want people to go check it out. Watch Court TV, watch you on Court TV. What I wanted to talk about is a little more general, but it is something that I'm just trying to get my head around because now we're into 2 years or 3. I don't know how many years. You'll tell me in a moment where John actually was killed. But it's a small. People don't know Canton is a small town. The court is a little bit further away in a larger town, but Canton is a very small town. Everybody knows everyone. Like you mentioned before, there's a pizza parlor owned by one of the connected people, if you will, by blood to various other people. So it's a small town. And in fact, you talked about talking to people. I have 2 friends in Canton. I won't mention their names. And I wanted to get them to come, one or the other, to come on. And they said, I can't do that.
They can't. Nobody can go public on this case.
I said, I can't. I know these people. I didn't ask them even before I asked, what is your opinion? Before I even asked them to come on. That wasn't the point. In their mind, they didn't even share that with me. What they shared at that point, and they're very good friends. I understand that I wanted to do this, but they knew I would understand. They said, we can't do this. They didn't personally know anybody, but they go to the pizza shop, they do this, they do that, they go to the supermarket, they go to the library, whatever. They know everybody. They go to the church that somebody's in. So they weren't, even a couple of degrees of separation from anyone. And even at that, they were scared. So we've got this small town.
If you, sorry, Jim, just real quick, as they will tell you, if you come out on the wrong side, if you antagonize the mob, they will go after you.
And I've been, there's a couple of Facebook groups, and they are vicious with each other. And I'm members of all of them, but I'm like the guy, the Goldberg. I hide in the background. Nobody knows who I am. And I just read, and I don't go all the time, but all of a sudden I'll open up and check. Maybe I'll scroll a couple of pages and it's like,
yeah.
But what my mind is hard to get around right now. I'm trying to get into Karen Reed's mind. And we have to understand that, and we'll talk about a few of the things. She's become a celebrity, obviously, over 2 years. Started as a crime. She had some support. She got, and we'll talk about this too, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations through Turtle Boy's efforts for her defense team. But she has done some I mean, the documentaries are one thing, but I haven't looked at all of these. But there was one that came up where, are you familiar? Like, I think Jerry Seinfeld did it for a while, and James Corbin, where he'd drive around in a car and like with Paul McCartney, and they chit chat and they would do a karaoke in the car, which
it's
was
like Coffee with Comedians or something like that.
Yeah.
I
And
think that's the name of the show.
I watched a few of those. He did one where she's driving around Boston for some reason and being interviewed on the, I mean, this just, aside from, does this hurt your case? Even if it doesn't, even if she's not giving out, I mean, she's given 2020 interviews, I think, and certainly, like you say, the documentary. So now, but what I want to get in my head, if this had happened to me, is she convinced in her own mind, she's had time now. Now, again, she was drunk and she went home and all that stuff. And I can believe that she blacked out the actual activity, not blacked out physically, but the memory isn't there on it. If I sat down, it's this whole thing, I sat down across from her, there's no cameras. And I would say, Karen, and I know she's been asked this, and she says, absolutely not. She absolutely is 100% sure she did not strike him in any fashion. Scare him, back up and scare him. No, she dropped him off alive and left. That's the party line. In her brain, though, does she debate? Did she wake up in the middle of the night and say, I could have, not intentionally? No one at this point, I'm not going to try and say she backed up trying to kill him. I know that she's charged with second-degree murder or something. So that's what the prosecution has to do. But what is she so now elevated or supported by pink people and what's his name, Turtle Boy, and now newspapers and whatever? Has that saved her psyche? This was a guy she was pissed at because she thinks he was cheating. This was her boyfriend. She slept with him.
And in all the interviews, Jim, she can barely contain the anger that she still feels to this day to John O'Keefe. She blames him she seems to blame him for her predicament, but she doesn't even contain it. So this happened on a Saturday night, and Karen was arrested on a Tuesday and arraigned on a Wednesday. And in court, her lawyer on that Wednesday told the judge, my client had no criminal intent. And then he said the same thing on the courthouse steps to the media. So if there was any way at all that Karen had been in touch with her lawyer that day, the day of hours after John's death, she had found David Yannetti on the website, Googling DUI lawyer. And so she had been in communication with him that early on. And she met with him the first time Wednesday of her arraignment in jail. And if there's any way at all that Karen Reed would have said, I didn't do this, or even I don't think I did this, David Yannetti would have said, any lawyer would have been, my client didn't do this, and she looks forward to her day in court. I mean, how many times have we heard that, right? It seems like standard. But he didn't go with that. So they weren't disputing at all at that point. And so that means even in her mind, she didn't have any thought that maybe she didn't do it. And it was only later on that started to evolve. And I think she found enough to buy into to convince herself that she didn't do it. So I do believe at this point, she probably does believe that. And she's now acting like a crusader, and her mission in life is to go out there and speak out against injustice and corruption and falsely accused. And so she's now morphing this into a cause that gives her life meaning. And I do think she probably believes that she didn't do it.
So that adds such a human nature to it, and how you can, like I said, either intentionally, if you're evil, you come up with stories and whatever to protect yourself, but she's not evil. and what she did, but what she is doing to, again, as I mentioned, it's a small town. So all the witnesses, semi-witnesses, are all still in the town. They live in the town. And except for the experts who are coming from other places, the witnesses for the case, both sides, and the various vilification, the camps. There's the Karen camp and the poor O'Keefe's family. They're in the court every day, the father and the mother, and it's not going to bring their son back. And again, right. Things that I did in the first podcast, I want to put here too, because it's important not to forget the victim. He, at the time of his death, was caring for his nephew and his niece, who were in, pre-teen or teen. They weren't, kids. And they had lost their mother and father in quick succession. I believe both to health issues, but I'm not sure if they were both cancer. And it was either, and you can tell me it was either his sister and brother-in-law or his brother and sister-in-law, but he was uncle and he was caring for them. Do you know where they are now that he's gone as well?
I believe they're being raised by the grandparents with the help of John's brother, Paul. Some combination of that. There's very different, like you said, very incredible tragedy that they've gone through. So I don't really dig into what their family situation is and what's going on, but and I believe they're living in the same house. So you want to, for kids that have gone through that, if possible, let them have as much level of normalcy as possible so they can stay in the same school system, have the same friends and things like that. So where this conspiracy has totally embroiled the town where they live, where the other people that they remain close to are accused of deliberately murdering basically their father.
Right.
So, the niece is still very good friends with the McCabe's, with Bo Chen and her daughter. And so, very difficult for these people to have lived in those circumstances. It's been incredibly hard for the McCabe children and children related to the Alberts, nephews and nieces and stuff like that. Special considerations have had to be made in every one of those schools. They're hounded and harassed, threatening emails. This mob is brutal. And I don't mean to look, there are decent people that believe in Karen Read's innocence. I know some, I know many. But everybody has to understand that there is no evidence against anybody else. None. And even if you think that, there are questions that need to be asked, okay. But if there's no evidence, there ought to be some hesitation in destroying the lives of so many people that are very likely innocent. And I would say certainly innocent, but I'm saying even from the perspective of somebody just doing a flyover view of this case. But it's this hysteria like the Salem witch trials, what I liken to, which I don't know if this is a unique phenomenon here.
It is trust me, it's very, I'm not an expert, but I've done 400 podcasts of murderers. Okay. And this is unique. And everyone will say that, until the next thing. No, this is unique. Yeah. The support from O.J. Simpson, I don't think had people with, signs and things at his trial, although they thought he was railroaded.
Oh, they did. I was out there.
You were out there.
Yeah, I was visiting my girlfriend at the time when the trial was going on, and there were a lot of people.
There were
not just near the courthouse. I didn't actually go near the courthouse, but there were people with the signs just on street corners.
Wow!
But it was a racial issue. This was a hot time out there, not long after the riot.
He was also a celebrity. King. You expect that to bring people out. She's not before this. She's not a celebrity. She was a person of the town. Right. So what do you think you've been following the pretrial, which I have not. Is there any inclination that there's a big surprise coming? Surprise.
Yeah. So we got a hint at this. From the hearing last week. So we know that in the vehicle. All right. So not to get too deep into vehicle data, but we all have what's called a black box inside our car. And the black box.
This I didn't know. I want people to listen because I never absolutely could not figure out, understand this. And so please explain the black box.
Okay. Well, and Jim is probably driving a 74 Nova, so that might not have a black
Oh,
box in it. I don't
thanks.
know, but
Thanks. Thanks. I
um,
appreciate
but
that.
no,
Yeah.
but
No, it's a
any
It's a Tesla. No, just kidding.
all right, all right. Well, then you
It's
definitely
a
got to.
Rav4. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it's got one. 2017.
Oh
So I'm
yeah.
sure it's
Oh
got
yeah.
one.
Well, and black box has been around for a long time. Now the black box is a little bit different than what we think of in a plane. All right. The black box is designed for different purposes. It's designed to record data. Well, first of all, you have multiple systems in your car, in a modern car now, with sensors that are trying to detect, even just in older cars, whether or not the airbag should go off. But now to tighten the seatbelt, and now these sensors look for detect objects in the path. Some of them have automatic braking systems. It's a very sophisticated piece of machinery, and so some of this information that is there for safety reasons is gathered in what's called a black box. Now, the black box only if there's an event triggered. Now, in normal black box, that's just if there's an accident. So if there's some kind of a collision and there's sensors that will detect that, it begins making a snapshot in the data. Now, what it does is because that data had been recording continuously, from the moment the snapshot is is triggered, it records data from 5 seconds before, and then up to 5 seconds after, but not beyond that. And so that data police can later get, or insurance companies or whatever, within the black box data. Now, that's called an EDR. That black box is the technical event data recorder. The event data recorder did not record anything for John O'Keefe, but that is, as we learned during the trial, that's typical for a pedestrian strike because of the weight differential between the two objects. However, in Karen's car, which is a Lexus, so Lexus Toyota have their own additional system recording data in it called TechStream. It's called TechStream. Now, the TechStream data is a little bit more sensitive. It records a wider range of events. In the time that Karen owned her vehicle, there were 2 events triggered, and only 2, and they both happened that night. The first one, as they're approaching 34 Fairview, where the crime takes place, they're following Waze on John's phone because they'd never been there before. The Waze tells them to take a left at 12:23 and 46 seconds, but they missed the turn. So now they have to do a 3-point turn. They're probably arguing. Karen's not in a good mood. She doesn't want to go to this party. So when she does the 3-point turn, when she hits the reverse, she hits the gas at over 30%. And the algorithm says, okay, something weird is happening here. Let's create an event. That's the first event created in the history of the car. And it shows a 10-second snapshot, 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after. And what we see in that is a 3-point turn. All right. That starts a clock ticking, though. It's because 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that first event comes the second event in the history of the car. And that second event is caused because, again, she hits the gas going in reverse. This time she hits it 70%. And the vehicle reaches a speed of 24.2 miles an hour. And she hits the gas. She holds that gas for at least 5 seconds. And then the data runs out. So at some point, she obviously braked. But she went at least 60, 70 feet at a substantial speed. And that's the second event. Now, this TechStream data, the state was able to get in a chip-off. It's called a chip-off when they get this data, with the defense expert present back in December of 2023. This is in preparation for the first trial. But there was a software. So there's various systems within the car, including your entertainment system, that actually are important for this because that has the clock, for instance. And there's also GPS within a modern vehicle. So there's a lot of data that you would expect to normally be able to get in the vehicle data that they didn't get in the first trial. And part of it was because there was a software upgrade that just wasn't available yet and became available after the first trial. Part of it was possibly because the state trooper didn't really know what he was doing, didn't know how to do it. And so, in fact, because they had the defense expert present, when he couldn't do it, he had the defense expert do it and did it for the state. But she only got, I think I may be slightly off on this, but I think there's 3 circuit boards in there and information could have come from all three, and she only gathered it from one. I don't know. So there's a lot of potential missing data. Well, the state now in the second trial went out and hired real experts, and they did a new chip off in this past December, and they got 8 gigabytes of new data. Now, we don't know what's in that data, but we got a hint at it from the prosecutor last week when he said the new data shows exactly time and place. So what that probably means is we're going to have timestamps for these events. So whereas before, we don't know what time that, for instance, that 3-point turn is, strictly by using that data, we don't know what it is. Now, we can figure it out by correlating it with the GPS and Waze data on John's phone, because he's in the car too. But we should be able to get that actual timestamp from the vehicle data itself. And we think it sounds like the state probably got this from the new chip off. And if so, it's going to show a lot of things. It should show exactly what time John got out of the car. It should show exactly what time she did the 3-point turn, 8 minutes and 4 seconds earlier. It should be able to show exactly what time John was struck. And I have said, now we also know that John's phone moved for the very last time at 12:32 and 16 seconds. And based on the correlation of the vehicle data, I have said that for a long time that the accident, or whatever you want to call it, probably occurred at 12:32 and 12 seconds, plus or minus 2 or 3 or 4 seconds. So I've been saying that for a long time. Well, we learned a little additional data yesterday from a hearing, and that is that John last touched a button on his phone to close the phone at 12:32:09. That's 3 seconds before my estimate of when the impact was. So I think fairly consistent with it, that he got out of the car, he had his phone in his hand. A couple of seconds later, he looks up, Karen's coming out in reverse. So that also might suggest that the phone, there was time for him to put it in his pocket, but it could also, does that indicate that the phone was in his hand? Now remember, the phone was found underneath his body. So I just gave you more on vehicle data than you'll ever want to hear again.
No. No, it's important. And again, the two things, the concept with the phone is, again, you've got to go back to being incredibly conspiratorial, or you got to really twist yourself in knots, like the JFK assassination. Now we have all these documents that aren't telling us anything, but we all knew that. But in that, the alternative theory of the crime, again, is that he made it into the house, and so again, the phone doesn't show that. So the only way the conspiracy works is if he dropped his phone before he went in the house. Okay. Yep. So of course, no one does that. I don't care if you're drunk. I constantly.
Or what if he possibly dropped the phone in the car and went into the house, and Karen, as she left, was angry and threw it out the window?
There's that too.
But she never has said that she did that.
Well,
so
no, that's fine. But I'm still in my story. The only way that works is he hasn't got his phone. And it's because it shows it didn't go into the house. So you can't say, oh, he took it into the house and then this happened. He took it into the house and that happened. It didn't go, if you trust the tech, and people can say I have reasonable doubt about it, but that the phone never went into the house. So to go with the conspiracy, he drops the phone accidentally in the ground, goes into the house to the party, is knocked out, but he's dead or whatever. They drag him out in pitch black. It was pretty dark out there in the winter, and they look for a spot to drop him, and they see his phone. They want to drop him on the phone, or just by happenstance, the exact spot of the lawn they picked is where his phone is. I mean, that's twisting yourself into a pretzel.
Right. Well, that's this, that's the thing about this conspiracy theory is, so you could look at an isolated thing like that and say, you know what, it's not impossible in some quantum math way. It might be possible, right? So let's say John does go in the house, and this could explain later why they were dialing his phone, because they know that his phone is in the yard. I don't know why they know, but for some reason they know that, and they're dialing it so that it lights up. Oh, there's the phone, and they go over and they drop John still alive on their own lawn. Not even bothering to put Stop. That I don't care what theory you want to have, of the conspiracy.
Now, again, you say, oh, they're not going to put him into a car and drive him somewhere and dump him in the woods. Okay. Well, maybe they should if you're really trying to cover, or you call the police and you say, look, this was an accident. No, and then if you want to start lying, he threw the first punch. There's all stuff that you can still, be conspiracy, but you don't want to get in trouble. He's dead. We can't bring him back. It was a fight. He started it, whatever. But who in their right mind, forget that you're police, that you investigate, that you went to college, I guess. You're not an imbecile.
Right.
I know you're thinking, oh my God, say it was only 3 people. It was all happening in the basement. It wasn't everybody in the house. Somebody, he didn't walk out himself, and he's a big guy. Someone or someone's picked him up and said, what do we do with this?
I don't understand how normal people, if they take a close look at this, believe in this theory. I really don't.
Well, and again, I want to close with except stay tuned, but I want to close with again the Turtle Boy thing, and I don't mind that she's benefiting and she's not stupid. So when he started both the money and the support and getting people. But the people out on the lawn, and I've said this before on the other podcast, I went up there a couple of days and stood amongst them. And most of them normal, everyday people, but they got something up, they got hair up their butt about the mayor or the prosecutor or the D, all this, that he should be impeached or vote against him. I don't even know if there was an election this last year for any of these elected people.
Yeah, so local politics becomes a factor. And
local politics, huge.
Old high school feuds or a fight that took place in the bar 5 years ago, some slight. Now it all resurfaces, and this becomes an excuse to use it.
But I'm looking at these parents with a little kid that's 7 or 8 years old with a T-shirt on, and I'm sorry, I would not bring my kid to a protest, even if it's political. This is not political technically, but I believe in political things, and I protest. I don't have a child. I would not bring they don't know what they're doing. And then they could be picked on at school or something. But that's the part that really bothers me, the grassroots people, the normal guys. I understand the instigation for a Turtle Boy, for Turtle Boy supporters, for anyone else who has, like I said, all the group sites that have positive one side or the other.
Let me just, Jim, if I just to jump off what you were just saying about the kid thing, right? So, and you've spent time out there with them, and you just said that most of them seem like, for the most part, decent, nice people, right? And you got your kids with them, so maybe you're arguing that your kid is just there to see you voicing a support for justice. All right. Then the family of the victim shows up, and everybody in that crowd mercilessly boos the family of the victim. What does that impression leave on that 7-year-old kid? What do you when your kid says, who are we booing? Why are we booing? Oh, that's the family of the victim. Is that what you say? It's what's mind blowing.
Boo the prosecution if you want. I mean, it's there's two sides, but the victim's family, what did they do? If something, here's the point. People say, oh, well, they hate Karen Reed or this or that. They have decided amongst themselves, not being jurors, that she was involved. Again, the level of it, I don't know if they've been interviewed or what they think of it, but that's immaterial. That if something amazing comes out and proves the conspiracy, or there was a drone from Afghanistan that killed him, they would be the first to say, good, justice was done. But up until then, in my mind, everything I've read, everything I've seen, everything I sat through in the first trial, I believe she was involved. And that's what they're going by. And that is totally laudable. And for people to do that is criminal.
Yeah. Mm.
So there we go. So any closing, as you gear you're taking your protein bars and your protein shakes, you're ready for round 3?
So let me turn it back on you, Jim, because I like to hear people that have been following this closely and hear some of their theories on this. And you spent time on the ground, and we've just been talking about this, that some of these people, probably most of these people are more or less decent people. A lot of and this is not like political protests where they're all in their early 20s. These are people that are almost all white, more women than men.
Yep.
And most of them in their 40s, 50s, 60s.
Yep.
Not your stereotypical protester.
No.
Right?
No.
And so what is it about this case that resonates so deeply with people? Where they not only believe that Karen is innocent, but believe in it so fervently that they're willing to dedicate their time to go out there and dress in pink and be in that crowd. And in the worst case scenarios, they're willing to attack anybody online with questions, come after someone like me repeatedly, telling them, saying that I'm faking cancer, sending threats to me, sending food to my house and stuff like that. And even the majority of the people on that side wouldn't be engaged in activity like that. But when they see activity, they do see it, they stay silent and they stay supportive of those people doing activity. So, for instance, Turtle Boy. So what is really going on here? What is the psychology of the people that believe in this and that either support that they take pleasure in attacking of these witnesses? What's going on here, Jim?
It is all, no question, in these people's mind, this is what happened. And so she is a victim. She's more a victim than John O'Keefe. And that's my theory of what drags, or what, in this case, what brings people together to be so single-minded about it. How about you?
I'm sure there's different factors, right? Is part of it too, where people feel powerless in their life sometimes, or frustrated in their own life. And so it's easier, or it's somehow appealing to buy into a narrative where there are these corrupt forces that, because their police have power, and so that Karen is a victim of that, and they see themselves in that because of the frustrations in their own lives. Because, like I said, this is a really strange protesting age for this crowd, 40s and 50s. Are they transferring the frustrations they feel in their own lives into Karen? Is that part of it? There's obviously a lot of distrust in the police, but I don't even know how much of that is based on personal experiences with the police or just this general idea that authority is corrupt.
So let's wrap up, shall we? We'll be back again, but again, April 1st, as you say, it's just jury selection. That will take a time.
April Fools.
But the people will be out there through the whole thing, starting April 1st, and through rain and wind and storm. And if anyone wants to go up there, it's Dedham, right near the court, but there's a square, if you will, a grassy square, a grassy knoll near a funeral parlor, I guess. And that's where everybody congregates. And all the local TV trucks will be there with their antennae.
Well, some of that is now going to be in the buffer zone now. The buffer zone's been expanded. So I think that square might now be closed during the trial.
Oh, no, but obviously, they'll all find something that's legal or allowed, and so they'll all stand in front of that. So, but you're ready, right?
I'm ready. I'm not going to be there in Dedham, but I'm
That's
ready
right,
to. We'll be streaming the trial. We'll be streaming the trial on my channel, Yellow Cottage Tales, every day, and I'm there with a panel of people, including retired FBI agent Jen Coffenaffer and several other channels, and including Kate Peter, who's covered the case extensively too. So we do pretty good analysis that includes a lot of inside information.
When do you have an appointment for a Court TV thing yet, or are they going to wait till it gets started?
I'll be. They don't plan things a month ahead of time, but I was on twice this week. Every time there's a hearing or a trial day, they will have me on.
Good.
And so I'm on with Nick Rocco, who's also not a lawyer like me, and he's on the Karen side. And then a lawyer that's covered this case and is the most entertaining storyteller and lawyer you will ever hear. His name is Joe Krowski. So I hopefully Maybe you can get him on the. I haven't been able to get him on my channel. So good luck. And I'm friendly with him. We text each other
Right, but
during
it's like,
the
oh,
episodes.
this is my video niche. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna diminish my
Right.
my panache. And pitch the book again. Title and
the book is called Storm of Suspicion: The Trials of Karen Read. It's available on Amazon. You can get the Kindle. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. You can get the audio. I'm not sure if the audio is out yet, but it should be by, it publishes Tuesday. It will be by then. But I've already seen people that ordered the hardcover copy are already getting it. They started getting it yesterday.
Good.
Even though that's ahead of print. So
I think I did Kindle, and I haven't looked to see if that dropped. But you said the audiobook. Did you record it, or did you have a professional voice?
The publisher took care of that, and they got a publisher to do it. I would have been happy to do it. I was not someone that was comfortable in front of a mic a couple of years ago, but now it's old hat. So I would have done it if they wanted to save the money. But no, they got a professional. But I worked hard on it, and I hope people can take something out of it. And I don't want people there that are skeptical about the case or think maybe skeptical about the state's theory to think this is an anti-Karen book. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, I do conclude that the evidence, the state's case for manslaughter, at least, is very strong.
Correct.
But there's, it's also a personal journey about my experience covering this case, and even, how I've dealt with the public, having a team grow around me and have the team leave me because they were all free Karen Read. And I just hope, what I try to bring to the public is, I've started out this case ignorant, like we talked about the sausage making. So forensic data, autopsies, evidence rooms, all that stuff. I knew nothing about it, right? And I want people in the public to understand that we're all like that, and get to the truth. Be patient. Be a little skeptical about what a defense team puts out there. And sometimes, if necessary, depending on the case, be skeptical about what the prosecution puts out there. But dig into the truth, but understand there's a lot of things that we're ignorant about. And the prosecution isn't like the defense. They're not going to have press conferences. So we have to kind of figure out much of that on our own, or wait for the trial to see it. And so try to get to the truth. Know yourself. Know that if you have a predisposition to like conspiracy theories, which maybe we all do to some degree, right? But recognize that in yourself and say, all right, am I just trying to make this fit this preferred juicy narrative? No.
So it's Yellow Cottage Tales is the YouTube channel. And I think you have a Facebook for it too. So you go there and you can click and it takes you over there, or you go directly to your YouTube channel. All right, Kevin, I'm going to let you go. It's Kevin Lenihan, and it's Yellow Cottage Tales. And I want to thank him for being with us today on Murder Most Foul.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Jim, as always.